My topic, antibiotic resistance. What is antibiotic resistance? The value of antibiotics in medicine is enormous, as they have greatly reduced the number of illnesses and deaths due to infectious organisms, but due to the fact that they have been used for so long and so vastly, some infectious organisms have developed a resistance to antibiotics, meaning they have adapted to medicines, rendering them less effective. Why is this important? Antibiotic resistance is everywhere. People infected with antibiotic-resistant diseases are more likely to have longer and more expensive hospital stays. People are more likely to die from infectious diseases. How does this occur? Bacteria develop resistance from horizontal gene transfer or spontaneous mutation. Evolution of resistance through the obtainment of single spontaneous mutations is particularly relevant for certain drugs for which high-level resistance can result from a single mutation. For most antibiotics, however, multiple mutations are required to develop high levels of resistance. This picture is from the study of evolutionary paths to antibiotic resistance, where they studied 3 separate drugs, the drugs chloramphenicol, doxycycline, and trimethoprim. What does horizontal gene transfer and spontaneous mutation mean? Horizontal gene transfer is the transfer of genes between organisms in a manner other than traditional reproduction, meaning that if an antibiotic-resistant organism comes into contact with an organism that is not antibiotic-resistant, and they exchange DNA, then the organism that was not antibiotic-resistant can develop antibiotic resistance through the obtainment of DNA. Now, spontaneous mutation is just that, spontaneous. After abundant exposure to drugs, some bacteria develop mutations in their DNA. It allows them to be resistant to antibiotics, eventually being passed on through reproduction to more and more bacteria cells. Antibiotics are not sufficient to control the morbidity or mortality associated with infections globally. Antibiotics, and more specifically antibacterials, only work against bacteria. The intense use of antibiotics in these such settings has subsequently contributed to the emergence of resistant strains and also to the reduced efficacy of antibiotics. Resistant strains can emerge very soon after introduction of antibiotics. Antibiotic resistance in bacteria is exponentially growing, and the rate of discovery and development of new antibacterials is declining. Without a solution, what could this mean for our future? Without a viable, long-standing solution, current strains of infectious diseases could develop antibiotic resistance or a higher level of resistance that could lead to more costly health care, longer hospital stays, and ultimately higher mortality rates. More diseases may develop resistance, rendering antibiotics less effective, and as far as some strains completely ineffective. Diseases that may have once seemed quite easy to cure will become harder to eradicate and may even become incurable. Hospital-acquired infections are becoming a global challenge. Currently, it's estimated that more than 70% of bacteria that causes hospital infections are resistant to at least one of the antibiotics used for their treatment. The emergence of multi-drug resistant bacteria is a global issue, but the situation is more taxing in a developing world where their use is often unregulated and unnecessary. Socioeconomic and cultural limitations influence malpractices and overprescription to treat infectious diseases, for which efficacious medical treatments do not yet exist, such as HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, and salmonella, worsening the problem. Development of vaccines against these diseases will provide a cheaper and long-lasting solution that can save millions of lives, decreasing the emergence of antibiotic resistance and its spreading worldwide, therefore increasing accessibility to vaccines in the developing world and the elimination of antibiotic resistance worldwide. How can we prevent it? Other medical treatments against infectious diseases doctors can use are vaccines. Vaccines have completely or nearly eliminated both viral and bacterial infections, like smallpox, measles, mumps, and rubella. Today, reverse vaccinology and other methods allow for the identification of antigens, and vaccines can be developed with high scientific standards and quality. Vaccines fight against antibiotic resistance both directly and indirectly. By targeting bacterial pathogens, vaccines reduce the need for the use of antibiotics. But even vaccines created against non-bacterial pathogens can have an indirect effect on pathogenic bacteria by reducing complications associated with superinfections that usually require antibiotic use. Vaccines contribute to the reduction of antibiotic usage through herd immunity, by stopping the transmission of pathogenic bacteria to potentially susceptible individuals by limiting the number of infections in the overall population. Herd immunity also protects communities at a higher risk of infection, but no vaccines yet exist for the most crucial multi-drug resistant strains. Vaccine-resistant bacteria have never been reported either. Reverse technology and other medical advances have made it possible to make vaccines virtually against every pathogen. There are many ongoing preclinical and clinical research programs on antibiotic resistance pathogens. Hopefully, they will come up with efficacious vaccine candidates soon. In addition to providing alternative ways of controlling multi-drug resistant bacteria, vaccines can restrict the emergence and decrease the use of antibiotics, as has already been done with pneumonia and influenza. The development of vaccines against bacterial pathogens for which antibiotic therapies are still efficacious, including veterinary infections, will also further prevent the emergence of antibiotic-resistant strains. Together, vaccines and antibiotics can reduce the burden of infectious diseases worldwide. Vaccines and antibiotics have significantly contributed to improved health and also to increase the human lifespan. The fast-acting effects of antibiotics makes them crucial to treat patients. Also, when the source of the infection is unknown, and in cases of superinfections with different species of bacteria, antibiotics appear to be the only medical option. On the other hand, vaccines are usually not helpful in people already infected, and their power is generally constricted to a very narrow range of pathogens. But vaccines have contributed to the elimination of some of the most deadly infectious pathogens worldwide. It can create immunity to infections lasting for several years or for the rest of the patient's life, and are able to induce herd immunity. But infectious diseases are still among the leading causes of morbidity and mortality worldwide. This is mainly because the emergence of bacteria-resistant medications to treat several other infectious diseases. The development of new vaccine appears to be a promising solution to these issues.